I spent 17 years studying primate cognition at the University of Washington before my career took an unexpected turn. Dr. Marcus Thornton here, former professor of comparative psychology, current cautionary tale. People knew me for my work with gorilla sign language, my papers on chimpanzee tool use. I was a skeptic, methodical, evidence-driven. I rolled my eyes at finding Bigfoot marathons and scoffed at grainy trail cam footage that lit up social media every few months. Then the Patterson Creek Foundation approached me with an unusual offer. A privately funded research station in the Cascade Wilderness, unlimited resources, one objective: attempt communication with an unidentified primate species. They wouldn't say which species over the phone. The salary was obscene. I almost declined on principle, sounded like cryptozoology nonsense wrapped in academic language. But the Foundation's credentials checked out: published researchers, legitimate funding sources. And Dr. Sarah Kim, their director, had co-authored papers I respected. When she flew to Seattle to meet me in person, she brought something that shattered my skepticism: a plaster cast of a footprint. 18 inches long. Dermal ridges clearly visible, distinct from any known great ape. The stride length calculation suggested something massive and bipedal. We have 17 documented interactions over 3 years, Sarah explained, sliding photographs across the coffee shop table. Hair samples with unknown DNA markers, thermal footage, audio recordings of vocalizations that don't match any cataloged species. We've had 3 previous researchers. None could establish communication before their contracts ended. I examined the photographs. Tree structures, branches deliberately broken and arranged, rock formations that suggested intentional stacking. Sarah saved the most compelling image for last: a thermal capture showing a heat signature 8 feet tall, clearly bipedal, moving through dense forest at night. You want me to teach Sasquatch to use sign language? I meant it as mockery, but my hand wouldn't stop tracing those dermal ridges in the cast. We want you to try any method you consider viable. These entities demonstrate tool use, complex vocalizations, and what appears to be cultural transmission of knowledge. Whether you call them Sasquatch, forest apes, or unknown primates, they exist, and they're intelligent enough to potentially communicate. The scientist in me knew I should walk away. The curious part, the part that chose this field because I wanted to know what other minds experienced, couldn't resist. I accepted a 6-month contract. The Patterson Creek Research Station sat 40 miles from the nearest logging road, accessible only by helicopter or a 2-day hike. Solar panels powered a surprisingly modern facility. Laboratory space, sleeping quarters, observation blinds positioned around a central clearing where Sarah's team left gifts. Fruit, tools, objects designed to test cognitive abilities. They visit every 3 to 4 nights, Sarah explained during my first week. Always after midnight. They take some items, rearrange others, sometimes leave things behind. She showed me a collection of arranged riverstones, each placed with clear intentionality, patterns suggesting mathematical understanding. We've documented 15 distinct individuals based on track size and thermal signatures. What we believe is an extended family group. I set up my equipment with the same rigor I'd use for gorilla research: motion-activated cameras, audio recorders sensitive enough to capture subsonic frequencies, a modified keyboard interface I developed for chimp studies, large rubber keys with symbols representing basic concepts. I programmed it to emit specific tones when pressed, creating potential for 2-way communication. The local Snoqualmie people had warned the Foundation against the research. Their elder, Joseph Rainwater, visited the station shortly after my arrival. 70 years old, he moved through the forest like it was his living room. My grandfather called them Tsemequis, Joseph said, refusing to enter the clearing where we left our offerings. The people who live in the deep places. They're not animals. They're not human. Something else. Something old. He looked at my keyboard setup with obvious disapproval. Teaching them to talk to you, That's a mistake. Some doors stay closed for good reasons." I thanked him politely and dismissed his concerns as cultural superstition. I'd heard similar warnings from indigenous communities during my work in Africa and Indonesia. Taboos existed for practical reasons that evolved into spiritual beliefs over generations. Nothing more. The first contact happened on my 19th night. I was reviewing thermal footage in the lab when movement caught my eye through the window. Something massive stood at the clearing's edge, just beyond the reach of our floodlights. The motion sensors hadn't triggered, either malfunction or deliberate avoidance. Through my binoculars, I made out a silhouette that sent ice through my chest. 8 feet tall, minimum. Broad shoulders that would make a silverback look slight. It stood perfectly upright, posture more human than ape, watching the station with obvious intelligence. The smell hit me next. Musky, organic, unlike any primate I'd encountered. Not unpleasant exactly, just other. I should have woken Sarah. Protocol demanded it. Instead, I activated the keyboard remotely, illuminating its symbols. The creature's head tilted, studying the device. After 5 minutes, it approached. Its gait was wrong, too fluid for something that size, moving with purpose through the clearing. In the keyboard's glow, I saw details that my training couldn't reconcile. A face simultaneously ape-like and disturbingly human. Hair covering most of its body except for palms I glimpsed as it knelt before the keyboard, as that caught the light and reflected it back amber gold. It examined the keyboard for several minutes, massive fingers surprisingly delicate as they traced the symbols. Then it pressed a key. The tone sounded. The creature jerked back, alert but not frightened. It pressed the same key again. Same tone. Recognition flashed across features I could barely process, understanding that its action caused the sound. For the next hour, I watched it systematically test every key, head cocked as it listened to each unique tone. It was experimenting, learning, demonstrating cognitive abilities that suggested language potential. When it finally withdrew into the tree line, I sat trembling in the dark lab, my understanding of human uniqueness fundamentally shaken. I had just witnessed non-human intelligence engaging with abstract symbols, not trained behavior, not conditioned response. Curiosity. Intentional learning. Whatever these creatures were, they were nothing like the forest giants of pop culture documentaries. The next morning, I found massive handprints pressed into the soil around the keyboard, and one of the symbol keys, the one representing food, had been deliberately covered with berries. It understood cause and effect. It understood symbolic representation. And it was trying to communicate back. The handprint measured 11 inches across. I made 3 casts while Sarah documented everything with meticulous photographs. Dermal ridges distinct and unique. Fingerprint whorls unlike human or any known great ape. The berry placement wasn't random, precisely centered on the food symbol, clearly intentional. "It's demonstrating symbolic association," I explained to Sarah, unable to keep excitement from my voice. Seeing that key produced a tone, then marking it with actual food. That's abstract thinking. That's proto-language. Over the next 2 weeks, the creature, I started calling it Subject Alpha in my notes, though that felt reductive, returned 6 more times. Each visit showed progression. It would press the food key when taking our offerings, press the water key near the stream. Once, after arranging several rocks into a careful pattern, it pressed the key I'd labeled Tool, a symbol showing hands manipulating an object. But the real breakthrough came when Alpha brought others. I woke at 2 a.m. to motion alerts and found 3 distinct heat signatures in the clearing. 1 massive, Alpha, I assumed, and 2 smaller, perhaps 7 feet tall. Through the thermal camera, I watched Alpha demonstrate the keyboard to them, pressed keys, waited for their reaction. One of the smaller individuals, Subject Beta, approached cautiously and mimicked the action. They were teaching each other. Cultural transmission of learned behavior, I was witnessing the foundation of language acquisition. I spent days modifying the keyboard, adding more complex symbols. Yes, no concepts. Basic directional indicators. A symbol representing same, and another for different, crucial for establishing mutual understanding. I recorded every interaction, analyzed the vocalizations they made while using the keyboard. Low-frequency calls ranging from 80 to 200 Hz, some below normal human hearing. They seemed to communicate with each other through combinations of these sounds and visual gestures. "This is bigger than Gorilla Sign Language," Sarah said, reviewing footage of Alpha teaching Beta to use the directional symbols. Coco and Washo learned from humans through years of intensive training. These subjects are self-motivated learners transmitting knowledge horizontally through their social group. The Foundation's enthusiasm bordered on fevered. They doubled my funding, extended my contract, brought in additional monitoring equipment. Dr. Raymond Hutchinson arrived from Berkeley, a linguist specializing in language emergence. Dmitry Volkov, our tech specialist, built a more sophisticated interface with over 60 symbols and the capacity to create simple two-symbol combinations. We were so focused on the science that we missed the warning signs. The new keyboard went active on a Tuesday. By Thursday, Alpha had mastered 23 symbols and regularly used two-symbol combinations. Water drink. Food take. Forest home. Each interaction filled me with wonder. We were documenting the emergence of interspecies communication in real time. Then Alpha made the first true sentence. I was alone in the observation post when it happened. Alpha approached the keyboard with unusual deliberation, studied the symbols for several minutes, then pressed 3 keys in sequence. Human. Question. Alpha. The formation was crude, but the intent crystallized in my mind. It was asking about me, identifying me as a category, human, and expressing curiosity about itself. Did it wonder what we called it? What we thought it was? My hand shook as I activated the speaker system we'd installed for responses. Alpha. Friend. I kept it simple, using the same symbols it had available. The creature went absolutely still, those amber eyes fixed on the speaker, then swept the tree line until they found the observation post. Found me, though I'd thought myself hidden. It held my gaze for a full minute, and I felt the weight of that intelligence assessing me. Then it pressed 4 keys. Alpha. Question. Human. Name. It was asking my name. The researcher in me knew I should maintain distance, preserve objectivity. But in that moment, facing genuine curiosity from a mind I'd been told couldn't exist, objectivity felt like cowardice. Marcus, I said through the speaker. Alpha cocked its head, processing the sound. Then it did something that emptied my lungs. It vocalized, a rumbling, complex sound that approximated the phonemes. Marcus. Close enough to recognition, close enough to language. It pressed 3 more keys. Marcus, friend, good. Over the following week, our exchanges grew more sophisticated. Alpha learned to combine symbols in longer chains. Alpha Family Forest Live. Marcus teach Alpha talk. Once pointing toward the mountains. Alpha people, many their home. There were others, potentially many others. This wasn't an isolated family group, it was part of a larger population. The linguist, Raymond, analyzed the symbol combinations obsessively. It's developing a grammar, he said, showing me charts of Alpha's phrase structures. Subject-verb-object ordering, consistent placement of modifiers. This isn't just learned association, it's generating rule-based language. But Sarah noticed something we'd missed in our excitement. The gifts have stopped. They're not taking food anymore. And look at the thermal footage from last night. She pulled up recordings showing 8, possibly 9 individuals in the surrounding forest. They're not just visiting. They're watching. All night. Every night. Maybe they're curious, I suggested. Alpha's probably told them about the communication breakthrough. Or they're deciding if we're a threat. Sarah zoomed in on one thermal signature, something held in its hands, thick, heavy. That's a club or large branch. That one's carrying rocks. Marcus, they're armed. I dismissed her concern. We'd made incredible progress. Why would they turn hostile now? Every interaction had been peaceful, curious. Alpha called me friend. It was learning, teaching others. This was exactly what we'd hoped to achieve. On my 43rd night at Patterson Creek, I decided to take the next step. If Alpha could learn our symbols, perhaps it could learn written language. I prepared large flashcards with simple words paired with the keyboard symbols. Food with the food symbol. Water with the water symbol. Objects it already understood conceptually. I was arranging them in the clearing when I heard the sound behind me. Not footsteps. These creatures moved in absolute silence, but a low vocalization, so deep it vibrated in my chest. I turned slowly and found myself 15 feet from Alpha and Beta, and 4 others I'd never seen this close. They surrounded the clearing in a loose semicircle, watching me. Alpha was massive up close, over 8 feet, shoulders impossibly broad, muscles visible through auburn brown hair that covered most of its body, except for a face that still unsettled me with its wrong blend of human and other. The smell was overwhelming, musky, organic, wild. My hindbrain screamed at me that I was prey, that I'd walked into a predator's circle. But Alpha had never shown aggression. We were friends. We were communicating. Alpha approached the keyboard and pressed 4 keys with careful precision. Alpha. Question. Important. Marcus. Yes, I managed, voice steadier than I felt. Ask. It pressed more keys, thinking through the phrasing. Then 5 symbols. Human, hunt, alpha, people, why? The question froze me. Hunt? We weren't hunters. We were researchers, observers. I'd never expressed anything about hunting. Why would it think? Then understanding hit like cold water. Cameras, monitoring equipment, our constant tracking of their movements, documentation of their numbers. To an intelligent mind aware of its own existence, what did that look like? We'd been studying them like specimens, cataloging them like wildlife. No hunt, I said quickly through the speaker. Study, learn, talk, friend. Alpha studied the speaker, then me. It pressed 3 keys. Other, human, hunt. My mouth went dry. What other humans? Alpha made a series of low vocalizations to the others. 2 of them moved to the forest edge and returned carrying something. They dropped it in front of the keyboard's floodlights. A game camera, shattered. And next to it, a rifle, stock broken, barrel bent with impossible force. Marcus. C. Question. Friend. True. It was asking if I was really a friend, or if I was like whoever had brought weapons into their forest. Asking if I was different from the humans who hunted them. Before I could answer, Beta pressed keys. Human, lie, always. The others vocalized agreement, deep rumbling sounds that I felt in my bones. Alpha looked at me, and I saw something in those eyes I hadn't seen before. Calculation. Assessment. Decision-making about threat level. Friend true, I said, knowing how inadequate the words were. Marcus no hunt. Never. Promise. Alpha pressed 1 final key. Prove. Then they were gone, melting into the forest so quickly and silently that my rational mind struggled to accept that 6 massive creatures had simply vanished. I stood alone in the clearing with a broken rifle and the understanding that everything had just changed. Back in the lab, Sarah was pale, reviewing footage of the encounter. They were testing you. That wasn't a question. It was an interrogation. They're intelligent, I said, though my hand still trembled. They understand they're being observed. They've had negative interactions with humans before. Of course they're cautious. Marcus. She pulled up thermal imaging from the surrounding forest. During your conversation, there were 32 heat signatures in the trees. 32. They had you surrounded by a small army. I stared at the screen. Every direction blocked. Escape impossible. They'd let me stand there vulnerable while they decided my fate. We need to shut this down, Sarah said quietly. This isn't guerrilla sign language research. These aren't animals we're studying. They're something else. And I think we just failed whatever test Alpha gave you. But I couldn't stop now. We were so close to genuine communication, to answering questions that had haunted cryptozoology for decades. I just needed to prove we meant no harm, show them that humans could be trusted. I found the broken rifle in the clearing the next morning, and next to it a message spelled out in arranged stones, a crude figure of a human with an X struck through it. The warning was clear. But I didn't listen. I spent 3 days trying to coax Alpha back to the keyboard, left messages using the symbols. Marcus friend. Alpha safe. Talk please. No response. The thermal cameras showed dozens of heat signatures in the surrounding forest each night, but none approached the clearing. They were watching us. Waiting. This is over, Sarah said on the 4th morning. I'm calling for extraction. We'll document what we've learned and leave. We can't stop now. I was exhausted, running on coffee and obsession. We've made first contact with a potentially undocumented intelligent species. Walking away violates every principle of what? Playing with lives we don't understand? She gestured at the thermal footage. They're coordinating, organizing. That's not curiosity anymore, Marcus. That's a response to threat assessment. Raymond agreed with her. Dimitri had already started packing equipment. Even I could feel the shift. The forest had changed from research site to something else, something that watched with too many eyes. But on the 5th night, Alpha returned, alone. I was in the observation post when motion sensors flared, one massive heat signature at the clearing's edge. I grabbed the speaker remote with shaking hands. Alpha, Marcus happy see you. Talk please. For long minutes, nothing. Then Alpha emerged into the light, moving with a caution that hadn't been present before. It approached the keyboard slowly, glancing repeatedly toward the tree line. Checking exits. Planning escape routes. It pressed 3 keys. Danger. Coming. Marcus. My chest tightened. What danger? Alpha's fingers hovered over the symbols, clearly struggling with vocabulary limitations. Finally, Alpha, people, angry, human, threat. No threat, I said quickly. Marcus good, friend, Alpha knows. It pressed more keys, choosing them carefully. Beta, say, human, always, take, kill, forest, Alpha. People. Realization settled like lead. I wasn't on trial anymore. Humans as a species were. And history wasn't on our side. Logging, development, hunting. If they'd observed human activity in these forests, they'd seen nothing but destruction. Some human bad, I admitted. But Marcus friend. Want talk, want understand. Never heard Alpha people. Alpha studied me through the camera. I knew it could see the observation post, had probably always known where I watched from. Then it did something unprecedented. It vocalized. Not the rumbling calls I'd heard before, but an attempt at words. Kus, Lis, 10. My throat constricted. It was trying to use human speech, forcing its vocal structure to produce language beyond the symbols. "Alpha, listen," I said. "Tell Marcus." It pressed keys rapidly. Question: important. Marcus. Answer: true. Yes. Promise. Answer: true. The creature's posture shifted, shoulders squaring, head lifting. What came next, I realized later, was the real reason it had returned. The actual first contact, beyond symbol pressing and tone association. Alpha pressed 6 keys, paused, then pressed one more. Human. Think. Alpha. People. People. Animal. Question. The question punched through me. It was asking if we considered them animals, if we saw them as people, as equals, or as subjects to study, as things to catalog and categorize and ultimately control. Every word I chose mattered. This wasn't academic curiosity. This was Alpha asking if its people deserved respect, recognition, autonomy, asking if humans saw them as beings with rights or as specimens to document. "No animal," I said, voice cracking. "Alpha people. Think, talk, teach. Real people. Marcus see Alpha, same Marcus." Alpha remained motionless, processing. Then, other, human, not, same, think. It was right. Other humans, hunters, loggers, developers, didn't see them as people, saw them as myths or threats or resources. The broken rifle proved that someone out there was hunting them. "Marcus, tell other human," I said. "Make understand. Alpha people deserve respect, deserve safety, deserve home." What happened next still haunts me. Alpha vocalized something complex, sounds cascading through frequencies I could barely process. From the forest came responses, dozens of voices in a language that predated human speech. Then Alpha pressed more keys than it ever had in a single sequence. Human, not, understand, ever, human, take, everything, always, kill, what, not, understand, Marcus, good, but, human, too, many, Alpha, people, too, few, hide, always, or die. The raw intelligence in that statement staggered me. Alpha understood population dynamics, understood that humans were expanding, that their territory was shrinking, understood that remaining hidden was survival, and communication with humans risked exposure. "Tell Marcus what need," I pleaded. "Marcus, help. Promise." Alpha's head tilted, and I swear something like sadness crossed those features. It pressed 4 final keys. "Marcus, cannot, help, sorry." Then the clearing exploded with movement. They came from every direction, 8, 10, maybe more of Alpha's people converging on the research station. Not attacking, but coordinating. Several hit the solar panels with thrown rocks, precision strikes that shattered arrays in seconds. Others reached the generator shed. I heard metal screaming, components being torn apart with impossible strength. "Sarah!" I yelled into the radio. "They're dismantling." The power died. Emergency lights flickered on. Then those died too as something hit the backup systems. In the sudden darkness, I heard wood splintering, glass shattering. They were destroying our equipment. All of it. Through night vision, I watched Alpha at the keyboard one last time. It pressed keys I couldn't read in the chaos, then gripped the entire interface and lifted it effortlessly. The foundation bolts sheared. Alpha carried the keyboard to the forest edge and smashed it against a tree until nothing remained but fragments. I stumbled outside to find Sarah and Raymond, emerging from the main building. Dimitri was bleeding from a head wound, debris from the solar panel destruction. Around us, the station was systematically being dismantled. They weren't being violent toward us directly, but everything we'd built was being reduced to wreckage. "Don't run!" I shouted as Raymond started for the trail. "They're not attacking us. They're—" A figure materialized between Raymond and the forest trail. Not Alpha. Something larger, older, with silver-shot hair and scars across its face and shoulders. It held a massive branch like a club and vocalized something that needed no translation. "Stop." We huddled in the clearing while Alpha's people destroyed 18 months of research in under 20 minutes. They were terrifyingly efficient. Surgical strikes on anything electronic, methodical demolition of our monitoring stations, even finding our hidden trail cameras and crushing them. They'd observed everything, known where every piece of equipment was positioned. When the destruction ended, perhaps 30 of them stood at the clearing's perimeter. A tribe, a nation. The largest were 9 feet tall, the smallest maybe 6 feet. Children, I realized with ice in my veins. Families. They'd brought their families to show us exactly what we'd been studying. Not animals, not specimens. People, with children to protect and territory to defend. Alpha approached me directly, stopping 3 feet away. Up close, the intelligence in those eyes was undeniable. Human-like, but not human. Something that had evolved alongside us but taken a different path. It vocalized carefully, forcing words through anatomy not designed for them. Mar, Kus, go, tell, human, leave, Alpha, people, alone, or... It didn't finish. Didn't need to. The silver-scarred elder stepped forward and drove its club into the ground with enough force to bury it a foot deep. The implication was crystal clear. Then, they were gone. Just gone. 30 individuals melting into the forest without sound, without trace. Only the wrecked station proved they'd ever been there. Sarah's hand shook as she examined our smashed equipment. They could have killed us, easily, but they didn't. Because Alpha vouched for us, I said quietly. It believed we were different, but it was overruled. Raymond clutched his recording device, miraculously intact because he'd been wearing it. We have documentation. We have proof they're intelligent, that they can learn language. We have nothing, Sarah cut him off. Every primary recording is destroyed. Every piece of evidence that wasn't on our persons is gone. She gestured at the ruins. And who's going to believe what we say? That Bigfoot learned to use a keyboard? That it asked philosophical questions about personhood? She was right. We sounded insane even to ourselves. The helicopter extracted us at dawn. As we lifted above the canopy, I saw figures in the trees below, watching, making certain we left. Alpha was among them. I recognized the posture, the auburn brown hair. It raised one hand in what might have been acknowledgement or warning. We'd made first contact with an intelligent, non-human species. And they'd chosen isolation over communication, because humans couldn't be trusted with the knowledge of their existence. The question Alpha asked, whether we saw them as people, had been answered not by words, but by history. By every forest cleared, every wilderness turned to development. By hunters with rifles and researchers with tracking equipment. We'd been weighed and found wanting. 3 weeks later, I sat in a University of Washington conference room while administrators reviewed my preliminary findings. I showed them photographs of the plaster casts, described the keyboard interactions, detailed Alpha's linguistic progression. Fascinating speculation, Dr. Thornton, the dean said, her tone making clear it was anything but. But without primary evidence, without peer-reviewed documentation, this reads more like science fiction than research. There were 4 of us. We all witnessed. Dr. Kim has already submitted her report. She makes no mention of achieved communication. Neither does Dr. Hutchinson, and Mr. Volkov declined to make a statement. because Sarah had been right. Coming forward made us look unhinged. The Foundation buried the research, paid generous settlements in exchange for NDAs. My contract was terminated by mutual agreement. The site at Patterson Creek was officially abandoned, all permits revoked. I tried to publish anyway. Academic journals, cryptozoology websites, anyone who'd listen. Nobody did. My reputation evaporated. Former colleagues stopped returning calls. Grant applications were denied without review. They didn't need to silence me. I'd silenced myself by telling the truth. 6 months after Patterson Creek, I was living in a studio apartment in Portland, teaching remedial biology at a community college. My former life, tenure track, research grants, respect, felt like it belonged to someone else. At night, I reviewed the few recordings I'd managed to save on my personal drive. Alpha's voice attempting my name. The sequence of keys spelling out questions about personhood. I couldn't let it go. I started monitoring reports, missing persons in wilderness areas, unexplained animal attacks, hikers who'd seen something but were dismissed. The patterns emerged slowly, but they were there. Clusters of sightings in Washington, Oregon, Northern California, concentrated in old-growth forests, especially areas slated for logging. A family in Darrington reported massive footprints and howling that made their livestock panic. A trail maintenance crew in the Gifford-Pinchot found their equipment destroyed overnight. Chainsaws bent beyond repair, trucks with shattered windows. A hunting party near Mount Hood went silent for 3 days. When they emerged, they refused to discuss what happened. One hunter checked himself into psychiatric care. I reached out to each of them. Most wouldn't talk. Those who did shared details that matched my experiences. Intelligence, coordination, deliberate communication through actions. These weren't animal encounters. They were territorial warnings. The Temecways, Alpha's people, were pushing back against human encroachment, but quietly, strategically, in ways that looked like accidents or folklore rather than organized resistance. Then I found the others, researchers like me. Dr. Linda Prescott had spent 4 years in British Columbia studying unknown primate vocalizations before her funding disappeared and her recordings were confiscated by the Canadian Wildlife Service. Trevor Morrison, a wildlife biologist, had documented tool use and what he called proto-linguistic behavior in the Olympic Peninsula before being fired for mental instability. Keisha Washington, a primatologist, had captured video of what she identified as coordinated hunting strategies in Northern California, video that vanished from her university server overnight. We found each other through cryptozoology forums, recognizing in each other's stories the frustration of being right and unable to prove it. We started a private channel, sharing observations, building a database of encounters that official science refused to acknowledge. "They're everywhere," Linda said during one of our video calls. "Every major forest system in the Pacific Northwest has an active population, probably thousands of individuals, and they're getting bolder." "Not bolder," I corrected. "Desperate. We're running out of wilderness. They're running out of places to hide." Trevor shared a map he'd been developing, incident clusters overlaid with logging permits and development projects. The correlation was undeniable. Every major outbreak of Bigfoot activity corresponded to human expansion into previously remote territory. "It's war," he said flatly. "Just a very one-sided, very quiet war. They can't confront us openly. We outnumber them maybe 10,000 to 1. So they sabotage equipment, create fear, make areas seem haunted or dangerous. Anything to keep humans out." "And when that doesn't work?" Keisha asked. The silence on the call was answer enough. We'd all seen the reports. Hikers who never came home. Hunters found dead, their weapons unused. Logging accidents that didn't quite add up. Nothing provable. Nothing that pointed to intelligent intervention. But the patterns were there, if you knew how to look. Alpha asked me if we saw them as people, I said. If I could do it over, I'd ask the same question back. Do we see ourselves as people who share the planet, or as the only species that matters? My obsession deepened. I spent every spare dollar on trips into the backcountry, following up on reports, documenting evidence that I knew would never be accepted. I found tree structures, recording howls that made my spine freeze. Once, in a remote section of the Cascades, I found a clearing with rocks arranged in patterns. Mathematical precision, possibly astronomical significance. And I found bodies, not fresh. Skeletal remains, scattered, partially buried. Human remains, at least 3 individuals based on skulls and pelvic structures. Deep in territory where no trails existed, where hikers would never venture. The bones showed signs of massive trauma, crushing force, impossible for any known predator. I reported the find to the county sheriff. A recovery team went in, brought out what they could. The official report listed them as missing persons from various years, cause of death, consistent with fall trauma and animal predation. Case closed. But I'd seen the bones, seen the crushing damage to rib cages and skulls. No fall did that. No bear, no cougar. Something bipedal, incredibly strong, and intelligent enough to hide evidence of what it had done. They were killing us. Rarely, selectively, but killing us nonetheless. Taking the ones who went too deep, stayed too long, threatened their territory. The question was, were they wrong to? I kept teaching my classes, going through the motions. But my mind was always in the forest, replaying that night when Alpha asked if we were hunting them, wondering what I could have said differently, whether there was any answer that would have changed the outcome. Then, 14 months after Patterson Creek, I got an email with no sender address and a subject line that consisted of a single word. Friend. The message contained GPS coordinates in the Olympic National Forest and a time, 11 p.m., 3 days from then. Nothing else. I showed it to my online group. Trevor warned it could be a trap. Linda thought I should notify authorities. Keisha simply said, "If you go, don't go alone." But I knew I would go alone, because if Alpha was reaching out, if this was Alpha, then going with company would be seen as threat. And I owed Alpha an answer to the question it had really been asking. Could one human be different? Could one of us be trusted? The Olympic National Forest at night is darkness that city dwellers can't comprehend. My headlamp carved a weak tunnel through trees that had stood for centuries, following a trail that appeared on no map. The GPS coordinates put me 6 miles from the nearest maintained path, in terrain the Park Service classified as extreme remoteness. I carried no weapons, no recording devices beyond a small voice recorder in my pocket. And that was probably a mistake. Just a backpack with water, emergency supplies, and the printout of Alpha's email. If it was Alpha. If this wasn't elaborate harassment from someone who'd read my discredited research. The trail opened into a clearing around 10:45 p.m. Natural amphitheater formation, ring of old-growth cedars, carpet of moss that muffled sound. I'd seen this configuration before. The Patterson Creek clearing had similar features, places where they gathered, meeting grounds. I waited in the center, forcing myself not to pace, not to show fear. The forest around me was too quiet. No owls, no rustling of small mammals. Everything had fled or hidden. That meant they were here, watching, waiting for what? Me to prove something? Fail some test? At exactly 11 p.m., Alpha stepped from the tree line. I recognized the gait, the auburn-brown hair, the way it moved with fluid confidence through space. But it had changed. Scarring across one shoulder, claw marks, maybe a bear encounter. Leaner, harder, like the past year had been difficult. It stopped 30 feet away, studying me. Marcus, it vocalized, the word clearer than before. Practiced. Alpha, My voice cracked. You came. It moved closer, stopping just outside arm's reach. This close, the smell was overwhelming but familiar now. This close, I could see intelligence burning in those amber eyes. It carried something, a canvas bag which it set on the ground between us. From the bag, it removed the broken pieces of the keyboard. Select keys, carefully preserved. It arranged them on the moss. Talk. Important. Marcus. Listen. I knelt across from it. Mirror image. Old researcher and undocumented primate conducting discourse without observers or documentation. Marcus, listen. Always. Alpha studied the keys, then pressed them in sequence. Muscle memory from months ago still intact. Human. Come. More. Many. Alpha. People. Danger. Big. My chest tightened. Where? Show Marcus. It pulled out a map. Actual paper map, torn from some guidebook or trail marker, with areas circled in charcoal. I recognized the locations. Proposed logging operations, resort development, 3 separate highway expansion projects, all cutting into the last strongholds of wilderness. Understand, I said. Human take forest. Always take. Marcus. Say. Help. Remember? It pressed keys with something like accusation. Promise. Help. Alpha. People. The promise I'd made in the clearing before everything fell apart. I'd said I would help, that I would tell other humans, make them understand. And I'd tried. God, I'd tried. But nobody listened. Marcus try, I said quietly. Human not believe Marcus. Think Marcus crazy. No proof, no evidence. Human not believe Alpha people exist. Alpha made a sound, low, rumbling, almost like bitter laughter. It vocalized carefully. Good, not exist, safe, but human, still, come, still, take, still, hunt. The paradox of their situation crystallized. They needed to remain hidden to survive, but remaining hidden meant humans treated their territory as empty land, ripe for development. No recognition meant no protection. What Alpha want Marcus do? I asked. Marcus still want help, still friend. Alpha was quiet for long minutes, processing. Then it arranged more keys. Question. Hard. Marcus. Answer. True. Always true. Promise. Human. Respect. Alpha. People. Never. Right. Question. It was asking if humans would ever truly respect them and wanted honesty. Wanted me to confirm what it already knew. I thought about my career destroyed for telling the truth. The bodies in the forest. The development maps. The rifles and chainsaws, an inexorable expansion of human territory. I thought about every species we'd driven to extinction while claiming we didn't know better. No, I said. Human, not respect. Not all human. Maybe some. Like Marcus. But most human fear what not understand. Kill what they fear. Alpha right. Human always take. Something shifted in Alpha's posture, vindication mixed with sadness. It vocalized something complex, and from the surrounding forest came responses. They were all here, the whole tribe or family group listening to our conversation. Alpha pressed more keys. Alpha, people, decide, fight, or hide. Forever, hard, choice. Fight human. I shook my head. Human too many. Have guns, have machines. Alpha people lose. All die. Hide. Forever. Means small. Territory. less. Food, less. Safe. Alpha. People. Die. Slow. The impossible choice. Extinction through conflict or extinction through attrition. I understood now why Alpha had contacted me. Not for help I couldn't provide, but for witness. For one human to understand and acknowledge what was happening. There's third option, I said carefully. Marcus, tell human. Make documentary. Show evidence Alpha people exist. Show intelligent. Show deserve protection. Alpha's response was immediate, pressing keys rapidly. No. Show human. Then all human. Come. Want. See. Want. Study. Want. Catch. Alpha. People. Become. Zoo. Animals. Become. Specimen. Dissect. Worse. Than. Now. It was right. I'd seen what happened to the last undiscovered tribes when they made contact. Tourists, researchers, disease, exploitation. Good intentions paving roads to cultural annihilation. What Alpha want then? I asked, frustrated. Marcus here. Marcus listening. Tell what need. Alpha studied me with those two human eyes, then did something unexpected. It vocalized my name, Marcus, then pointed at me, pointed at itself, Alpha, and vocalized something in its own language. Long, complex, full of meaning I couldn't parse. Then it pressed keys. Real, name, cannot, say, but, Marcus, no, now, Alpha, not, name, person, has, name, has, family, has, life, Marcus, see, true, question. Understanding hit me like cold water. Alpha wasn't a subject designation. It was a person with a name I couldn't pronounce, teaching me that everything we'd cataloged and studied and documented was people, individuals, not specimens or data points. Yes, I said, throat tight. Marcus see. Marcus always see. Alpha. I stumbled over the inadequacy of the word. You are person, real, true. Marcus never forget. It pressed one final sequence. Marcus, tell only true story, not where. Alpha, people, are, not how, find, just, tell. Alpha, people, real, think, feel, deserve, live, peace. Promise, I said. Marcus, tell story. Protect Alpha people. Make human understand, even if human not believe. Alpha reached across the space between us. I forced myself not to flinch and placed one massive hand on my shoulder. The weight was incredible, the strength obvious. It could have crushed me effortlessly. Instead, it squeezed gently, a gesture of friendship, trust, farewell. It vocalized one more time, slow and clear. Thank you, friend, Marcus. Be safe. Then it gathered the keyboard pieces, placed them back in the bag, and handed it to me. Evidence of our communication. Proof that would prove nothing to anyone who didn't want to believe. Alpha stepped back, made a complex vocalization to the forest, and the trees came alive with sounds. Dozens of voices in response. A people I'd never see. A culture that predated mine. A species surviving in the margins while humanity expanded into every remaining wild place. Wait, I called as Alpha turned to leave. Marcus want Alpha no. It paused, looking back. Marcus sorry. Sorry for all human do. Sorry cannot help more. Sorry world is broken. Wrong. Alpha's face did something that might have been a smile or a grimace, expression I couldn't quite read. Marcus. 1. Human. Good. Enough. No. 1. Good. Human. Exist. Then it was gone, moving through the forest with impossible silence. And I was alone in the clearing, with a bag of broken keyboard pieces, and a promise I didn't know how to keep. The walk back to my truck took 3 hours. I heard sounds in the darkness, wood knocks, low vocalizations, the sense of being followed by many individuals who never showed themselves. They were escorting me out, making sure I left their territory. At the trailhead, as dawn broke over the mountains, I found something waiting on my truck's hood. A woven band of cedar bark and grass. Intricate pattern beyond human patience. A gift. Or maybe a memorial to what might have been if humans and Alpha's people could have shared this world equally. I kept it. Keep it still. 3 years have passed since that night in the Olympic National Forest. I still teach community college biology, still live in my Portland studio. My former colleagues still avoid me. My Wikipedia page lists me as a discredited researcher known for Bigfoot claims. Students sometimes ask if I really believed I taught Sasquatch to talk. I tell them to focus on their assignments. But at night, I document everything. Not for publication. I learned that lesson. But for record. For the possibility that someday, maybe after I'm gone, someone will read this and understand what we lost. What we chose to destroy, rather than recognize. I keep a database now. Trevor sends logging reports. Linda tracks missing persons in wilderness areas. Keisha monitors infrared satellite data that sometimes shows heat signatures too large, moving in patterns too coordinated, existing in places officially empty of large mammals. We know they're out there. We know approximately where. We know they're losing ground every year as development pushes deeper into the last wild places. 2 months ago, a logging crew in the Cascades found something that made regional news for about a day. Tree structures, massive and complex, woven branches in geometric patterns. Natural phenomenon, the expert said. Wind damage, unusual growth. But I saw the photographs, saw the intelligence in the construction, the intentional design. It was territorial marking, a warning. The logging continued anyway. They cut down the structure and kept going. Last month, 3 loggers disappeared from that same area. Search and rescue found nothing. The official statement mentioned treacherous terrain and probable fall injuries. The company suspended operations for 2 weeks, then resumed. Nobody connects the dots because nobody wants to see the pattern. I could tell them. Could explain what happens when you ignore warnings from inhabitants who've lived in those forests for millennia. But they wouldn't listen. People rarely do. The voice recorder I carried that night in the Olympics captured something I didn't notice until months later. Background sounds. Vocalizations in frequencies barely within human hearing range. I sent the file to a sound analyst, claimed it was whale song, asked for linguistic analysis. Her report came back confused. Patterns suggest communicative intent, she wrote. Repetition and variation consistent with language structure, complex grammar, possibly dialectical variations. Source unknown. Language. Alpha's people have language. Culture. Probably art and music and stories passed down through generations. Everything that defines a people, a civilization, thriving in the margins while we pave over their world. I've started writing this account as narrative rather than research paper. Dry academic documentation failed. Nobody reads it. Nobody cares. But stories. Stories slip past skepticism's defenses. Stories make people feel rather than think. Maybe that's how the truth spreads. I don't use real names. Don't give specific locations beyond regional identifiers. The last thing Alpha's people need is coordinates guiding curious humans to their territories. But I tell the truth about communication, about intelligence, about the question Alpha asked me. Do you see us as people? I saw them. See them still, every time I look at development maps eating into green spaces. Every time I read about mysterious disappearances in wilderness areas. Every time some politician talks about opening up forests for resource extraction. We're killing them. Not with guns, though some hunt them still, seeking proof or trophies. We're killing them with roads and resorts and subdivisions, with logging operations and mining and hydroelectric dams, with the slow, inexorable expansion of human territory into every remaining wild place on Earth. And they can't fight back. Not really. 30 individuals can't stop bulldozers and chainsaws and the weight of human civilization. All they can do is hide, adapt, diminish. The cedar bark band Alpha gave me sits on my desk. Reminder of one good conversation between species who should have been able to coexist. Should have been able to share this planet. Would have maybe, in a different world, with different history. Sometimes, I imagine that world. Where Patterson Creek research continued. Where Alpha learned not just symbols, but full language. Where we established diplomatic relations, recognition, protection. Where indigenous knowledge about the Tzemeckes was respected rather than dismissed as folklore. Where wilderness wasn't something to be conquered, but shared. But we don't live in that world. I got one more email last year. No sender, just like before. It contained a photograph, taken from a distance, low quality, but unmistakable. Alpha, older now, silver creeping through auburn-brown hair. Standing in a forest clearing I didn't recognize, surrounded by others. 3 small individuals, children, learning something from the adults. Teaching, cultural transmission. They're still there, still surviving, still fighting the slow war of territory and existence. The email had no message. Didn't need one. It was proof that Alpha survived, that they all survived. For now. But I've seen the development maps, seen the proposed highway extension cutting through the Olympics, seen the expanded logging permits for exactly the regions where thermal signatures cluster. We're coming for their last strongholds, not out of malice, but out of indifference. Because we don't see them, don't recognize their presence, don't acknowledge their right to exist. That's what haunts me most. Not what happened at Patterson Creek, but what continues happening everywhere. Slowly, invisibly. The erasure of a people who never got the chance to be known. I tell students sometimes, carefully, hypothetically. Imagine we discovered an intelligent species tomorrow. What would our responsibility be? To study them, protect them, learn from them? Or would we do what we always do? Categorize, control, eventually destroy through benign neglect? Most students don't engage seriously with the question. It's too abstract, too fantastical. They don't know I'm talking about reality. About people I spoke with, learned from, failed. Alpha asked if I saw them as people. I did. I do. But one person seeing isn't enough when the rest of humanity refuses to look. I keep the keyboard pieces in a locked drawer. Keep the photographs and audio files encrypted and backed up in multiple locations. Keep this narrative updated, adding new sightings, tracking the shrinking spaces marked green on topographical maps. Documenting extinction in real time. Maybe someone will care after I'm gone. Maybe these words will reach someone who has the power to do what I couldn't. Make people understand. Make people act. Make people see. Or maybe Alpha was right. Maybe humans can never respect what we fear. Never preserve what we can't control. Never coexist with intelligence that doesn't look like ours. If you're reading this, whoever you are, whenever you are, they were real. They are real, if any remain. They had language and culture and families and names I couldn't pronounce. They deserved better than what we gave them, better than being erased from existence without ever being acknowledged. Alpha's question was fair. Do you see us as people? We failed to answer correctly, failed to answer at all. And now the forests grow quiet, the thermal signatures fewer each year, the sightings rarer. The spaces on the map marked wilderness, shrinking to nothing. I taught Bigfoot to communicate. It asked one question that should have changed everything. We heard the question. We understood the question. We just didn't care enough to answer differently. That's the truth no one once documented. That's the real horror story, not of monsters in the forest, but of the monsters we became by refusing to see. If any of Alpha's people survive to read this someday, when they've learned our written language and dug through our digital ruins, I saw you. I recognized you. I tried. It wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. One good human, Alpha said, was enough to prove humans could be good. But goodness without power changes nothing. I'm sorry. To Alpha, to your people, to the world we should have shared, I'm profoundly, eternally sorry. The keyboard sits broken in my drawer. The forests sit broken on the maps. And somewhere in the shrinking wild places, if any remain, people without names we recognize try to survive one more generation. That's what I taught Bigfoot to ask. Whether we would let them survive. The answer was always no. We just didn't have the courage to say it out loud.